Right, well, let's get underway. So Helen's here. Helen's all ready to go. Um, Great to have everyone sort of starting to trickle in. Looking forward to your presentation. So over to you, Helen. I'll
Thank
start
you.
the timer.
Okay, so the subject I'm talking about today is Global Foundations of Architecture, which is a first-year Bachelor of Design subject with 600 students. So 75% local, 25% international. And the international components still largely from mainland China, but increasingly more geographically diverse. It's also a diverse subject in terms of the student cohort.
Last night, it didn't.
It's also a diverse subject in terms of the student cohort. They're mostly architecture majors, but also quite a lot of breadth students from other faculties. And it's a foundational course for future architectural history study at both undergraduate and particularly master's level. So broad in scope, chronologically and geographically. So the broad aims of the subject designed for this online course are to provide students with a high challenge, high support learning environment. Their first years, they need a lot of scaffolding of their learning, but they're very quick to develop academic and disciplinary specific skills, and very quick also at learning how to use and apply digital technologies. The assessment is focused on including real world tasks to help prepare students for the workforce and give them experience in real world problem solving and also working collaboratively. So we have one group assignment focused on this. There's a focus on including as much active learning as possible in both asynchronous and synchronous components of the task of the curriculum. And the assessment is designed to be formative as much as possible and nested to build skills steadily throughout the semester, hopefully without too much stress. The intended learning outcomes and the generic skills have been mapped against the Bachelor of Design and University of Melbourne graduate attributes. And there's a focus on a thematic organisation of the syllabus to avoid an overcrowded curriculum. So there are basically 4 major building types that we study, rather than looking at the entirety of architectural history globally pre-18th century. So avoiding overcrowding is a key aim. We're also trying to make sure that the global part of the subject name is reflected in the curriculum, so there's not a hidden Eurocentric bias. So in terms of, over here. In terms of the design of the course, I've adopted a flipped classroom approach. And this has been adopted firstly to encourage students to learn their declarative knowledge as much as possible before class. So synchronous learning can focus on developing skills in critical thinking and architectural specific skills. Students can learn at their own pace, which reflects cognitive load theory. It maximises the value of the subject coordinator, who's now facilitating synchronous interactive workshops rather than delivering more teacher-centric lectures. The subject coordinator no longer needs to be the only disciplinary expert in the subject. And this model also highlights the role of social interaction in learning, encouraging self-directed learning and aiding a transition to pedagogical learning later in students' undergraduate and particularly graduate degrees. The flipped classroom also helps achieve changes in the contemporary curriculum, moving from more proposition-based learning to experiential learning. And clearly, it is modelled on social constructivism in terms of pedagogical philosophy. And it's a philosophy particularly appropriate, I think, to this subject. Architects do work collaboratively in practice. The student body is very diverse in terms of nationality, religion, course majors, skill sets, and analysing architecture in terms of its relationship to society, culture and place really benefits from having the collaboration of all those different viewpoints and experiences. So in terms of teaching and learning activities, this is obviously, timetable is obviously over elaborated at the point of explaining this, but there are 2 or 3 short online videos, so asynchronous pre-learning, if you like. And then there's a synchronous workshop led by the subject coordinator. And then there are small group tutorials, which are also synchronous. So these are operated by Zoom. So to give an example, the online lecture will have a series of short lectures on key sites for city design. Each workshop will focus on an exercise in analysis and also teaching an academic skill. So comparing plans as analysis, reading plans as a skill. And there'll be an underlining thematic key concept in each workshop, which will be explained to students. So, and in terms of the tutorials, they're based on a few different formats. So discussing and debating tutorial readings, learning and practicing academic skills, engaging in virtual site visits, and also working on the group assignment and presenting it. So in terms of the assessment tasks, as I said, they're intended to be engaged in as much active learning as possible. So the asynchronous lectures and the sort of pre-reading have embedded quizzes in them, which are done through feedback fruits. So students have some multiple choice, quick, easy quizzes in those. They are assessed based on participation, but this is a hurdle requirement, so that needs to be done before class. The essay outline, students actually arrive at a thesis statement, an argument, and provide an annotated bibliography of the resources they'll use for their final research essay. They have this graphic building analysis task, the teamwork task, based on the heritage assessment, the real world kind of problem-solving assignment, if you like. And they present this as either a website or a poster. And then they present this in class. So it's a 12-minute team presentation, 3 minutes for each student to describe 3 points. So based on the themes of the topic of the assignment, site and context, function, architectural style, or construction. And then there's a final research essay, which is now due in the exam period, the first day of the exam period. It used to be due sort of week 9 and 10, but in architecture, there aren't really exams in other subjects, so that was sort of arriving at the time when they had all their design studio work due as well. This just spreads the learning and makes it a bit easier for them. So in terms of those assessment tasks, we do provide a lot of support in terms of research and library resources, working very closely with the library to provide help with research skills. And I've done workshops with the library on research skills and academic skills on essay writing to help students. We've also done a series of videos with past students and tutors on academic skills, which help students through peer learning, if you like. And also in terms of subject communications, there's a discussion board to facilitate communications. And there's also a weekly video introduction to what's happening. So to sort of facilitate rapport and connection with students in the online environment, particularly for first years. We know the first year experience is sort of stressful for students particularly. So providing sort of that greater contact is really key. And just to finish up, there is an ecology of resources which I've included and, you know, frankly plagiarized from Tom, which includes the tools that we're using for the subject delivery. So for example, the sort of active exercises, learning exercises in class are facilitated by the use of Padlet and Mural. And there's also apps that are used here and very useful for producing their graphic building analysis assignments that we've seen. So Google Tool Builder and SeekBeak and so on. Thank you.
Awesome, well done. Thank you. Have you developed some rubrics for the marking?
Yes, I have. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those are all on the site as well?
Yeah, you'll be able to see those.
Cool. Great. Awesome. Got probably time for one question. Anyone? No? Okay. Thank you, Helen.
Thanks,
I'll just
Tom.
reset my clock. So you did it in time, which is awesome. So we're over to Patrick. Second up. So if people can fill out their feedback form, or if you want to do that over the next week, it'll be available for the next week as well. And people putting links into their presentations, which is great too. You might have to stop screen sharing, Helen, to let Patrick take over. Are you able to start screen sharing, Patrick? Yep, great. Okay. So over to Patrick, you're second up.
Okay, hello everyone, and thanks Tom for coordinating this subject. I'm going to talk to you about a subject that I've been proposing, and potentially based on this subject that Tom has run us through, I may potentially apply for it to be considered for implementation at my faculty. So this proposed subject or unit is global cities, and it is an urban planning undergraduate unit. So for my side, I provided a bit of a welcome message to my potential student as to my little expectation of them and wanting to know them. And if they want to get to know me, I have provided a link here for them to click on it and get to know a bit about me. So that is a bit of an introduction to a welcome message to the unit. Then following on from that, I provided an overview in relation to what the subject is about, trying to connect issues across different cities and why different cities have different levels of development, why some are poor, why some are rich, why some are congested, and why some are less developed. So I provided that overview for students to understand the purpose of this unit or subject. Then I also introduced my design theory, which is constructivism theory, and I demonstrated how it connects with learning different aspects of how cities functions and how students through field experiences and working with different city councils from local through to the national level can understand how different cities have different development patterns and how they function within that. So based on that, I have the following learning objectives, and these learning objectives again are driven or are influenced by the theory underpinning my subject, which is the constructivism theory. So there are 4 key learning objectives or learning outcomes that students are supposed to be able to exhibit at the end of this subject. And for this learning objectives or outcome to be realized, the learning approach is going to be problem-based, which is also consistent with the constructivism theory, because learning how cities function is basically about engaging with people living in it and the management authorities in charge of driving the development patterns of the cities. So there will be emphasis on problem-based learning and experiential learning. So at the end of the day, the learning objectives or the learning outcomes will be realized. And as part of that, there will be a field visit or field work undertaken by students. And this field work is supposed to be undertaken at any city council of their student's choice. So we'll get to the assessment task and I'll explain more about how this field work will be done. So for this subject, the target is to attract students who are getting into the 3rd year, because it's a 3rd year undergraduate subject, and it is designed to attract students who are interested in urban issues, critical urban issues, from climate change to issues of infrastructure, transportation, and order. So students who have interest in that, and they are getting to their 3rd year of Bachelor of Design, they can choose this pathway in urban planning. Then it is also designed because it is an online unit, it focuses on various geographical contexts. So students across the globe who are studying online can apply and be part of this subject. So in terms of the mode of delivery of this subject, it will basically be a 12-week period of lectures and tutorials. So there will be 1 hour weekly Zoom meetings, and there will be a lecture capture available for students who are studying, who are disadvantaged by time in terms of their geographical location. Then there will be ongoing discussion on the discussion board. And there will also be one and a half hours weekly Zoom meetings. So for us to understand what the lecture and the tutorial focus will be, I have developed just a subject outline indicating what goes into each of the weeks and what the focus of discussion will be for the lecture and the tutorial. So following on from that, I move on to the assessment overview. And as I've already indicated, this subject is strongly rooted in learning by doing, experiential and program-based learning. So for the assessment task, students are required to demonstrate this understanding by looking at various cities from 5 major themes. So they will look at the socio-cultural aspect of the city, the environmental, economic, then the urban form, then finally they look at the governance aspect, just for us to understand how different cities operate or how different cities respond to development issues in different ways. And I put a bit of expectation in terms of the referencing style that is required for this subject. So let's look at how the various issues that I've talked about are reflected in the various assessment tasks. So there will be 3 key assessment tasks for this subject. The first one focuses on the group presentation, and it will constitute 20 marks for this assignment, and it will be due in week 5. So the first assignment will be Adobe Spark group presentation, and students will be put into groups based on so many factors: their gender, global geographical locations, cultural background, and they are expected to make a 20-minute presentation in class. And the topic for discussion will be one of the lecture topics that I have listed above of their choice. So they have to select one of them and develop a presentation in a group manner on it. And the purpose of the presentation is for them to build, it's in line with the learning outcomes, for them to develop their confidence in presentation and group work dynamics. And of course, this presentation will be assessed based on the clarity of their expression of their argument, then how they've linked their presentation with reading materials, then the level of analysis demonstrated rather than mere description of the issue that they are dealing with. So that would be the rubric that will be used to evaluate or mark the first assignment. Then the second assignment will be a field visit. So after the field visit, they develop a vision paper for that, and that will be due in week 9. And that will be an individual assignment, and it will be 40 marks. So the student will be asked to use a SurveyMonkey to conduct field visit across various social media platforms, from Twitter through to Facebook, in 2 cities of their choice, a city that they are familiar with and another that they are not so much familiar with, using social media to understand the 5 key issues that I talked about: governance, economic, environmental, and all the other issues that I talked about, to demonstrate the differences between the cities and how governance or how those cities are different in terms of development trajectory. So students will do this and submit it in the form of a report. But once they are in the field doing that, they are encouraged to send photos about the issues that they are encountering in terms of their interview with people via social media, and some of the problems that they will be using through a social media handle that we designed for this subject. And the assessment criteria for the first assignment will be used in terms of the analysis, a critical engagement of the reading materials, as well as clarity of expression. Then the last assignment is in relation to a design of a poster And this assignment is also an individual assignment that is worth 40 marks and it will be due in week 12. And this requires, after the data collection for assignment 2, students are then required to develop a project that will potentially guide the future of the city that they've chosen, or the city council that they are working in. So this proposal is basically supposed to be based on the data they've collected, and based on that, they suggest a possible future scenario that they want the city to move, the direction that they want the city to progress into. So so basically, this assignment, apart from it's being a poster, it is supposed to illustrate a lot of photos and illustrations that depict the city trajectory over time. Then it will also be assessed based on the 3 criteria. The first is the strong argument in terms of where the city is coming from and where it is now, and the potential future outlook that you as a student, you want the city to be. Then, of course, linking your argument with literature and readings is critical, as well as your analysis that you put in play. So these are the...
We'll have to finish there, Patrick, but that's...
I have finished, so, and the important resources that I put there. Thank you, Tom.
Awesome. Thanks for that overview. Awesome. So, Daniel, you're next up.
Okay, let me share my screen.
Okay, starting the timer.
All right. So just as a quick summary of to provide some context of what this course is all about. This is Info 9001, Health Informatics Tools and Methods. This is from the slides I presented the last time. It's a core course in the Masters of Information Systems in its health stream and part of the graduate certificate in health informatics. And it's the research methods requirement for the future research capstone project. One of the challenges that we faced was lack of understanding of the healthcare system and healthcare problems and the IT students, and limited exposure to the health information systems or health data from the IT students as well. And we have a very diverse group of students, with about half of them being clinicians and the other half being, among engineering, computer science, and business and commerce. What I did to redesign this course was, develop using this design pattern where complex concepts will be flipped, activities will be implemented using authentic scenarios, and the applied activities will be implemented using group work to enhance collective building of knowledge and peer learning. So this is the Canvas site that I have shared with you, Thomas. If somebody wants to access that site, please send me an email. I can happily share it, but I don't know. I didn't know of a way to massively share it with everyone. So there's this, the subject overview. Where you have, the intended learning outcomes, the generic skills, and the list of the assessments overview, and how does that map with the different intended learning outcomes. When we look at the modules, this is what a student will look at. So first we created a revamped syllabus for the course. This I created using LaTeX. If somebody wants to use LaTeX to create their own or adapt their own syllabus, I'm happy to share as well information about the course. And here I have all the different modules. It starts with the first module on research in health informatics and digital health, a second module on knowledge management, third one on data science, and the last one on healthcare simulation. When we look at then the ecology of resources, I use this same diagram that we have used in this course to explain students what will we be using and why all these different tools. And here I pasted some links to the resources that we will be using. So for example, here you have in the research collaboration tools, we have a shared Google Drive for slides. This is where students will be working on their presentations. So for example, in this example, we were working on using this PICO framework to generate clinical questions, and each group has their own slide where they can collaboratively in their, each one is in their own home at the time, but they can each feed into this slide, and each group has their own slide. And when we have our sharing session, then everybody can look at the same deck of slides. Another of the resources that we have used here is the Mendeley Library, where the students can share where I'll be, sharing all the readings and posting some interesting literature that it's applicable to what we will be working in during that specific module. In the data analysis tools, the idea is to make it as realistic as possible. So I have created a Jupyter notebook. Let me see if I can access it here. Whoops. A Jupyter notebook where we will be running our data analysis. And this is an example that I created to predict in-hospital mortality from a publicly available real data set of intensive care unit hospital stays. And this data set has been used for many thousands of real research projects around the world. So it's it's the quickest way to get students accessing real clinical data. Also, I provide some links to some public data sets. One of this is a synthetic data set of clinical data where students can either download this synthetic data set of people living in Massachusetts, 21 gigabytes of patient data, but they can also, if they want, they can access the code, and they can create their own Australian data sets by defining, the proportion of people in different age ranges, the different proportion of specific healthcare conditions, and the code then generates all the lab results that are concording to the disease and age definitions that we have described in advance. And here's some other tools that we will be using. Tableau is one of them. Tableau is a data visualization tool that's very used across the industry, all sorts of industries. So it's a very highly sought for job tool or ability. So I got a free license for students so they can use during the course, so they can do their data analysis using Tableau, and they can add a line to their CV telling their future employers that they are knowledgeable in using Tableau as a tool. So that's my ecology of resources, and the modules have included a combination of I have created this, table that lets students know every week, what do I need to do before class? And here I have, for example, an online survey, which is what we did the first, whoops, it's locked now. But it's a background survey to understand what are their learning needs and how should I adapt the course as we go through the semester. Some of these content, again, has been flipped. So I linked to these 2 introductory lectures by Dr. Bill Hirsch. He's one of the big wigs in health informatics. And then some traditional lectures. For week 2, we have a combination of resources. We have, traditional readings plus some online lectures and podcasts to introduce the topic that has been flipped, which is this topic in green, research in biomedical and health informatics. And then again, we all work in this, slide deck that I just shared with you, creating your PICO question, and each group gets different articles. And then, week 3, online tutorial and searching the literature using medical subheadings. And then, the flick content that we will be discussing in class based on those online tutorials. And finally, if I go into the assignments, the first thing that we ask students to work on is a group contract. I don't know if it's still open. Yeah, so they can submit their group contract that regulates how they will be working during the semester. This is the social constructivism component of the course. And this, to make sure that everybody understands the rules of engagement during the semester. And for their individual assignments, they will be working on answering questions about health informatics research. These are individual works. There's the rubric. And at the end of each assignment, I ask them to let me know about what are the learning challenges and desired learning outcomes for the next module. So I can, again, adapt for what the students are needing. And finally, the major group project is writing an NHMRC-like research proposal, again, to make it realistic and for them to be able to condense all their research methods that they have learned during the semester.
Great.
And that was it.
Yeah.
I tried to fit everything in 10 minutes.
Yeah. Well done, Daniel. Thank you.
Thank you.
So our next presenter is Chelsea.
Internet issues today, so I'm going to leave.
Yeah, you seem to have dropped out already, Chelsea. Okay, we can see your screen.
Yeah. No.
Okay, your audio seems to be cutting in and out, unfortunately. Okay. Yeah, that's fine, Chelsea. Maybe we just reschedule you for later on. Yeah, it's the vagaries of the internet, isn't it, really? Okay, so next up we have Katie and Brooke. Let me just make sure that Katie and Brooke have co-hosted.
Well, I'm fine if Brooke is. I'm going to leave my video off as well because of similar.
Yeah, no worries. I'll just make you both co-hosts.
Yep. We've got lots of homeschooling going on here, so.
Yeah, it's another reality of lockdown, isn't it?
Mm.
Okay, I'll start sharing my screen.
Okay, over to Katie and Brooke.
So we're just going to do a quick recap of the learning design framework that we use to design our course. So we'll start with that, and then this course is for Brooke's subject, so she's going to do going through the clicking the Canvas thing. So our learning design framework was a conversational framework, conversational ABC that was introduced by Diana Lorillard. And it uses the learning theories of instructionism, social learning, constructionism, and collaborative learning. And in doing so, it has 6 different learning types. So there's just normal acquiring of knowledge through instructionism, and then inquiry, where the learner is exploring. Then the learner is required to produce some sort of report or whatever sorry, I couldn't say, where they consolidate what they're learning. Then they discuss, so there's a focus on constructionism and social constructionism in this framework. So there's a lot of group work. So they discuss and to learn to articulate their ideas, and they collaborate, which means they have to produce what they've, and some product based on their inquiry, and then a practice process. So if you look at the figure below, there's a lot of arrows showing these learning loops, and each time you acquire, then inquire and produce, you're stepping up a level in terms of the depth of learning. So the target learners, it's a 3rd-year undergraduate subject that's introducing students to materials. It's a core subject, so all the students have to take it. There's about 60 to 70 students a year. They have a background in maths, chemistry, and they have to do other elective and breadth subjects. So the students who are taking this subject, because they're 3rd year, they will already be well adapted to the university learning environment. So they're assumed to have good skills in terms of computer skills, library skills, searching for their own papers and things like that. They're assumed to be well versed in those skills. Okay, Brooke, next, please. So
I guess also just wait with the target learners.
Yeah, sure.
With biomedical engineering, there are a fair few international students, but it's not as high as some of the other engineerings where you might have about 50% international students. So there's still a fair few domestic students as well.
That's a very good point.
Sorry.
Thanks. No, thank you. So in order to, because there are international and domestic students, we've introduced a get to know your students page. So the students each just take a moment to introduce themselves. So this course has a big focus on interaction between the students, and because it's a blended course, they will have interaction both on campus but also in the online space. So in this particular example, they use a video recorder to say a little bit about themselves and start to build our community of inquiry. So then next, the ecology of resources. So they're required to get familiar with the Canvas quiz, the Google Docs, because there's group work, so they can use Google Docs and Adobe Spark. They'll be using Google Forms to do some peer reviews, Google Slides for presentations, the Canvas discussion board. So if the Canvas modules, they can't actually go to the next module unless they've participated in the Canvas discussion board. And then poll EV will be taken during the lectures so that you can do some formative assessment.
Yep. So now I'll go through an example of how the subject is set out. So on the home page, we've got here what the curriculum is, so what they will go through each week. So we've set them up as lectures, workshops and assessments. So for the lectures, there'll be different modules up until week 10, and then they go through presentations, which is part of the assessment. So just clicking on one of these as an example. So for each of these modules, this is what the students will have to do. So they'll be learning outcomes based on each of them, and this is a subject that hasn't been taught yet, so I'm still coming up with all of these. But what they'll have to do is, so for each module there's be an activity. So it's designed so there'll be synchronous and asynchronous components. So beforehand there will be some textbook readings that they'll have to complete, as well as some videos for them to watch, and then there'll be 2 one-hour lectures. And the other thing that the students will have to do, as Katie said before, is to take part in a discussion on the discussion boards as well. And then there'll be some workshops that are associated with each of the lectures. So if we go back to the home page, for the workshops, the first 2 will be problem-based workshops that they have to complete in groups. Sorry, I think because I'm on student view. it's got there. So a lot of them will be group based because of the size of the class. And so we've told them to use Google Docs to work collaboratively as well. In terms of the assessments, there'll be quizzes, so short quizzes that they'll do online on Canvas. There'll be a large group report, lab reports, and a final exam. So in terms of the lab reports, we've built them into the workshops. So one of the workshops, they'll have one to learn how to write an experimental protocol. From that, they will write their own experimental protocols for each of the labs, which they will then have to hand in. So this is a hurdle. It's not part of the assessment, but it's to give them feedback. And then they'll actually carry out the labs themselves and then hand in a report, and the report is the assessment bit. So all of that will be done in groups. So there's the collaborative part, but then there's the formative assessment. So they're being given feedback all along until they hand in their final assessment. Then their term paper, so this is the report that's worth 20%, but then also a presentation. In week 5, they hand in a scope of work, so they outline what they're going to do their term project on. So for this, rather than giving them, they can do it on any sort of biomaterials application, there'll be about 4 or 5 different applications, and then they can choose. I've done assessments before where I give them free range, and then sometimes they get a little bit too complicated. So to make sure that they have some sort of direction, but they can pick what they want to do. There'll be a limited number of ones that they can pick. So they hand in a scope of works at the beginning, so they tell us what they're going to do their assignment on, and then we can give them feedback based on and tell them whether or not they're going in the right direction or they need to change a few things. And then in week 11 and 12, they hand in the report. So this is a group report that's worth 20%. And then they also have presentations associated with them. So one of the feedback that we got from when we did assignment 2 from Thomas was whether or not we should be doing videos as YouTube and post them up, because then they're out in public. I would encourage them to do, or be encouraging them to make videos, but they can then just post videos. We can make a page on Canvas for them to put it up. So the group paper and the group presentation, that's showing collaborative learning and social constructivism. We then have the quizzes, which I said before, so they're going to be learning from feedback there and getting, it's a summative assessment as well. We have set up along here discussion boards. So for each of the modules, as Kay said before, they have to write something in the discussion board. So we really are encouraging them to do it before they can move on. So discussion boards, so it's very, you can tell that it's been based on social constructivism, a lot of group interaction, a lot of group work as well. And that's it.
Right, we have 1 minute left for any questions. No, well done. Okay, excellent, keeping in time. Thank you, Brooke and Katie. And our next presenter is Lyle. He's probably getting his coffee out of the microwave. Okay, over to you, Lyle. You might need to unmute yourself as well.
There we go.
Yes, there we go. Now we'll
try again. Well, at least I've had the demo of getting the screen up. All right, can you both see and hear me and see the screen?
Yes, now we can. So your time starts now.
Terrific. Let's make a start. So the subject that I've been redeveloping, and I'm now already teaching in semester 2, online is Bayesian statistical methods. The design framework that informed the redevelopment of this subject is a combination of King and Mazur's flipped classroom and Diana Laurillard's conversational framework to accommodate different learning types. There's a full subject description in the 10-page study map and study guide, which I've included a link to. And I've written a fairly long piece that's actually directed at the students on the subject redevelopment. And I'm going to summarise some parts of that now. There are two groups of learning outcomes for Bayesian statistical methods. The first concerns the logic of Bayesian statistical inference and requires students to understand the use of probability as a measure of uncertainty and how the Bayesian updating process works as you've got data accumulating through your studies. The second learning outcome concerns Bayesian computation, where students learn to operate the most up-to-date software platforms and to perform Bayesian statistical analyses of realistically complex data sets. So the subject is a neat blend of mathematical theory and computing practice and data analysis. This subject is an advanced elective for students who are close to completing an entirely online, lecture-free Master of Biostatistics. They do this through a consortium of universities that form the Biostatistics Collaboration of Australia. Now, students are typically mature age upskillers or career changers. They're all highly motivated adult learners, and despite the fact that the course is taught entirely online, they have a constant presence on all forms of electronic communication and your inbox. Students get a lot of reading material and exercises which they work on at home alone. So there's always been a lot of out-of-class information transfer, knowledge attainment, and individual preparation. That obviously has the advantage, as others have pointed out, that they can work at their own pace and move backwards and forwards between videos and textbook and other types of material. The subject has, however, lacked the second half of the flipped classroom approach that promotes social interaction and gives students an opportunity to ask questions and share their problem-solving experience with others. And that's the idea that's informed the design of activities that I will outline shortly. Last time we ran the subject, when we delivered it in 2018, we tried to move students onto the new software platform Stan, but it was too difficult for them to install and to use standalone. And by now we're well aware of the trade-off between authenticity and ease of use. So this time around, we've taken a conversational framework as motivation to map a variety of interfaces for Stan to the types of engagement that these tools can afford the student. So we've got 4 levels here: narrative, interactive, adaptive, and productive. We've cut down of the original 5 levels, and we anticipate that students will enter at level 1 or 2 with narrative or interactive tools and climb the scaffold to level 3 or 4 by the completion of the subject. So we've got to get to level 3 in order to really satisfy the second learning outcome of using modern computing platforms to do Bayesian analysis. The hub for the subjects will be the Canvas LMS at the University of Sydney. It will hold a collection of curated material, including pre-recorded videos, some of which we make and some by colleagues, online tools and presentations, suggested reading from our own module notes, as well as published textbooks, research papers, and a selection of quiz questions. There are 6 fortnightly modules. And we start in modules 1 and 2 with simple one-dimensional problems requiring little computation. The students can build confidence and then progress through multi-dimensional problems in modules 3 and 4 with clustered data structures. And finally in modules 5 and 6, where students get to work on modern computing algorithms for the analysis of real-life data sets. Fortnightly activities include our Zoom tutorials, which are a discussion group, or here we are. I was going to say that's my colleague Koen Simmons and I discussing the benefits of living in the outback. After that, we're joined by the talking heads, and on this occasion last week, we were discussing Bayesian evidence measures in a courtroom case where a statistician was appearing as an expert witness. The assessments are a mixture of smaller tasks with short answer questions. So they're sort of fairly didactic sort of instructional pieces. And there are two much larger tasks that involve data analysis and require substantial statistical computing, both in the middle and at the end of the subject. Students typically work together to understand the medical research question around the longer assessments, and they help each other get the data resources together. But they're responsible for producing a report themselves, and it's individually marked, and there's a list of assessment criteria under the rubric. I've done those for assignments 1 and 2. The ecology of resources for this subject includes common tools for synchronous and asynchronous communication, a bunch of YouTube channels with statistics videos, first-rate video essays. A novel aspect of the ecology is the distinction between statistical packages like R and Stata and tools that are used to interface them, which for our students will substantially reduce the burden of accessing and operating heavy machinery like STAN. I've also acknowledged the importance of document preparation where, again, sophisticated online tools like R Markdown and Overleaf, which runs LaTeX, connect with less flexible software like Microsoft Word. So that's pretty much all I had to say. There's a bunch of references. The subject's up and running. We're into module 3 starting today, and so far so good. So thanks for your attention.
So have you had much feedback from students so far on the redesign?
Yeah, so they love the online tutorials, and they much prefer questions that encourage discussion. So as I said in the assessment tasks, a lot of it has been fairly sort of traditional mathematics question and answer, whereas we've now started putting up quizzes around sort of true false, or do you agree with this statement, or how would you proceed with this? So much more open-ended questions. And then that's how we're trying to do the data analysis assignments as well. So yeah, it's going much better than it did last time, that's for sure.
Oh, that's really good. Great to get some good feedback. Yeah, it sounds like the social aspect would be quite significantly different to their previous experience.
Yeah, there's no doubt that when the BCA started 20 years ago, it was a pretty one-sided affair. You know, it was traditional correspondence learning with the document delivery system. And we're in the middle of a major course overhaul, which will take 2 years. And in 2022, there will be a smaller core, in 4 subjects instead of 8. And the other subjects will have modules, so that they won't just be a sort of through composed thing doing here. So students will be able to move in and out of them in a sort of micro-credential way. Ideally, some of that would be available to master public health students as well, so that we didn't have to double teach everything, but that's a constant challenge.
Very good. So we have 1 minute left if anyone has a burning question for Lyle. Everyone's been pretty quiet today. And our next presenter is Chris.
All right, thank you.
So thank you all, and
Thanks,
well
Tom.
done for keeping well in time.
It was a big priority for me.
10 minutes isn't long, is it? Okay, so Chris, you're now co-host if you want to screen share and talk us through your course design.
Okay, so you should be looking at my screen.
Yes, we are. Thank you. I can hear you too. Great.
Great. So I am teaching algorithms and data structures online. So this is a subject that looks at the sort of building blocks of code and the theory behind code and how you build the basic elements of everything in your computer. So this is a copy of our live Canvas page because we're currently running the subject. So the main learning theory that I use to develop this subject is problem-based learning. And the goal here is to give students a set of skills, sort of a mental toolkit. The focus is on helping students become independent, active, self-driven learners. It's not about just memorizing facts, but sort of empowering students to go out and find information themselves and solve problems themselves. So our goals were to give students realistic problems and really motivate them to seek out the answers themselves. So one of the guiding principles of setting up our Canvas site was trying to make it really self-explanatory, in the hopes that students would feel empowered to just use the site themselves and sort of feel that they know where everything on the site is. So on the first page, we sort of explain how the course is going to run this year, because traditionally it was not online. We're doing a flipped classroom approach where we show some pre-recorded videos and other materials at the start of the week, and then ask students to come join us in a Zoom session where we do discussion and more problem-based activities. So the subject overview explains who our students are and what the goals of our subject are. So this is an undergraduate subject. It's targeted mostly to second-year students. And there's actually 2 different pathways that students come from. So they've either had 1 semester of previous programming or 2. So there's a little bit of overlap between some students' previous experience in our subject. But the nice thing about this online approach is that students who have already covered some of the first couple of weeks material, they can just skip those videos and go straight on to the more difficult problems. Oh, and the learning outcomes for the subject are also included on the Canvas page. So the goal is for students to know how to choose appropriate data structures and algorithms for giving computational problems and know how to analyze those. The modules we organized based on trying to anticipate student needs. So we have general information on the top of the page, how to contact us, the overall schedule, some general programming resources for the subject. And then for each week, we have a targeted module that goes over the material for that week. Just to show an example, that includes some video, which again, if students have covered some of this material, they're encouraged to just skip ahead through these videos. And then there's a live Zoom session, which we also record and post online. There are quizzes that students can take on their own time. And I also provide a collection of different readings and links and online resources that students might want to explore if they want to go into more detail about any of the topics from that week. This is an example of the kinds of problems that we do in the live Zoom sessions. I give students an open-ended problem and break them out into small groups and ask them to come up with solutions. So again, this is based on problem-based learning, where you want to give people really open-ended problems to encourage active exploration and skill development. And it's also based a little bit on social constructivism theory, because the students are really learning from each other in the discussion. We have weekly workshops as well. And this is part of our ecology of resources, is that we use Jupyter Hub rather than having students develop code on their own individual devices. It's a little bit less authentic in terms of the learning experience, because it's kind of a managed special environment, but it really does help with cognitive load, because we can take care of a lot of the issues in the background and students don't have to deal with them. Things like ensuring that they have all the correct libraries. And as much as possible, we've tried to replicate the authentic coding experience. So there's a terminal here where students can work in the terminal. They can write their own standalone code. But to help get students started, we've also provided Jupyter notebooks, which are kind of a more familiar programming structure for some students who are not as familiar with C coding. And this is all building up to 3 programming assignments, which again are fairly open-ended problems where we give students a data set, such as the City of Melbourne open census data, and ask them to build data structures and algorithms to store and analyze these data sets. And finally, the ecology of resources for the subject is this Canvas page and our Jupyter Hub. And we also use Piazza for student discussions. And I couldn't put a link to the live Piazza page, but you can see a screenshot here. So it's extremely active. This is from yesterday, and students were posting questions every 10 or so minutes. And what you can see here are these little green S's and the yellow I's next to each question. That's the student and the instructor response. So we actually make an effort not to answer questions on Piazza immediately. because if we wait 15 minutes, usually another student will jump in and start answering the question. So that's an example of what you see here. A student asked a question about the getLine function, and another student jumped in and answered the questions before we got there. And then we can endorse their answers just to assure the other students that that is in fact a correct response. So it's a really collaborative platform, and students are constantly building on each other's answers. And like I say, it's been really, really active. So I've been really pleased how this works out. Yeah, just to show some trends, we've been having about 60 threads posted a day over the last week. This is in a class of 400 students. And on a typical day in the past week, there's been 200 students visiting the board. So we've had thousands of individual posts on hundreds of threads. Yeah, so I think to sum up, the main approach that we're going for is problem-based learning, trying to build as authentic as possible an environment for students to learn these skills while still sort of supporting them and helping them with some of the details in the background. But as much as possible, encouraging students to be independent and actively explore this information. And we're also basing this on social constructivist theory, encouraging students to discuss with each other. All the workshops are peer programming, and a lot of what they're doing is discussing on Piazza and working out problems collaboratively. Yeah, and that's it.
Great. Once again, we've got just under 3 minutes left. So any questions? I mean, I suppose my question would be, how are you finding the redesign and the level of interaction from students compared to previously?
Pretty good, actually. I would say students are probably more active this year than last year when we were on campus. Certainly the Piazza Forum is getting way more activity, and I think there's actually been more activity in my online Zoom lectures than I would have gotten on campus. But I also really heavily redesigned the lectures to be more of a flipped classroom approach. So there is more interactivity and more discussion.
So if you went back to face-to-face, how would you bring some of these concepts back into there?
Essentially, I would just splice the lectures I have together. So I split the material into stuff that's kind of just going through definitions and basics, and that's what goes in the videos, and then the problem design. So I think I would just take 15 minutes of the basics and the problem design and make that into one lecture where we spend the first 15 minutes in a standard lecture, and then the last 45 minutes is the discussion and problem solving.
Great. Any other questions?
Yeah, Chris, it's Lyle. I'm really interested in the idea of helping students who don't have the same programming background. Have you found that's been a success? You have a large class, don't you? So there must be a bunch who struggle. Yeah,
it's been mostly a success, and that's what we're doing through Jupyter Hub with this managed environment. I think about 90% of students have been able to sort of make the jump into the more authentic coding. But a lot of students have very little coding background, and we often don't anticipate what they don't know. So like we had people trying to compile their Jupyter notebook. And we didn't tell them what to do that because it never occurred to us that they would try that.
It's amazing. Yeah, so that's the equivalent of me getting an email yesterday from a student saying, I don't have a mathematical background. And one of the tutors wrote back and said, well, maybe you shouldn't be doing a master in statistics. So yeah, but we only have 50 students, where you've got 300 guys.
Well, the great thing about the Piazza Forum as well is when students encounter that problem, they immediately post. And another student will usually say something like, you can't compile your Jupyter notebook, even before we can jump in and help them.
Great.
Well, you submit a comment in the feedback. You need to Google xylophone bomb if you don't know what that means, because that's the problem I have. It's jumping in, answering every question straight away. So it takes discipline to step back, although having a tutor now has helped me because he keeps me away.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you. Great presentation.
Thanks for your question, Lyle. Right on time. There we go. So we're now over to Leah. We can see your screen, which is a great start. Yes.
Screen?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, so I'm going to talk about an addition that I would like to include in my course, Introduction to Machine Learning. So the course has been run for 1 semester so far in its current form, and I'm mostly going to talk about an additional module that I want to include. Before jumping in, just in terms of the cohort and the target learners, this is a first semester graduate level class. And people come in with a quite varying background. So this class is also a little bit multifaceted. It touches on the mathematical background underlying this machine learning algorithms. It touches on implementation. So there's a lot of coding going on. It touches on practical applications, applying all this to actual data sets. So different students have very, very different backgrounds in coding and maths. And part of the point of this class is to get them all on the same level for later more advanced courses, but also to give them kind of a holistic idea of machine learning, not just what's the underlying theory, but also how to apply it in the real world, how to evaluate properly, and so on. As of last semester, the whole class has been delivered in a flipped classroom setting where we provide lecture materials every week, which students consume asynchronously. And then we have live sessions during the actual lecture slots, which are held as question and answer sessions with a little bit of structured interaction through quizzes and so on. And in addition to that, there are also weekly workshops, 1-hour workshops, which are still held synchronously, where students come in small groups and work through mathematical problems with pen and paper and with guidance from a tutor. Okay, that's the general setup. And here is the first Canvas page, the home page with space for a little introduction video. And just a general overview of the whole class. Here's a kind of very rough course map about what's going on. On the top here are the assessments that are going to happen throughout the semester. On the bottom are the core course modules that we have. And the main thing I'm going to talk about is this excursion into ethics and machine learning. I also talk about the intended learning outcomes and point to the ecology of resources, which we can look into in a second. The subject overview page is just the core information about the subjects. Again, the intended learning outcomes, the assessments, and so on. Assessments are a final exam, which is going to count for 40%, 2 individual programming tasks, where students apply the algorithms to some actual problem. And then this is the addition here. There's a group project on the ethics and machine learning excursion topics, which will have a pretty small percentage, mostly because I'm just testing it out and testing the waters in terms of weight. But it's designed to actually bring groups, collaborative learning, social constructivism, problem-based learning into this whole class and leverage the diversity that we have in the context of a very specific problem that we're going to look at. So let's move on to the modules. I've mocked up 2 kind of the core content modules, module 1 and module 2. The first one is a refresher module. The second is a topic of linear classification. And even before that, we have the welcome and the resources here with an ecology of resources page over here. So Canvas will be our hub. And then there's Zoom and Poll everywhere. And I also make an effort down here to explain what the different resources are for and why they are important. So here the left-hand side resources are for kind of weekly interaction with feedback, quizzes, and Zoom lectures. And the right-hand side ones are more for collaboration between the students and are mostly relevant for this additional module where they will prepare and present a group project on ethics and machine learning. And this particular module is module 5 here. We have an overview page where there will be an introductory video and a motivation, quite an elaborate motivation, explaining that probably the teaching approach and intended learning outcomes are quite different from what they are used to. And the point of this module is to understand a problem and analyze a problem rather than solving it straight away, by critically discussing in a group, in a diverse group, the multifaceted nature of this problem, There will be a peer feedback loop, and part of the whole learning outcome or point here is to enhance soft skills of the students. So students should embrace the diversity of this class. They will, in a problem-centric scenario, dive deep into an ethics issue in machine learning, and they will be exposed to tools for online collaboration, use those tools, and present an engaging presentation. And here's a little bit more detailed information on the activity lists and how the logistics are going to work. Yeah, the logistics, I'm not sure how I'm doing time-wise, but so one lecture will be skipped in order to make room for this actual group work. Then the workshops of a week will be repurposed for the group to actually interact with tutors and get feedback on their work. And then another lecture will be repurposed for 10-minute group presentations in breakout rooms. Okay, let's move on to an example project. So this is here for the students to get a very concrete idea about what's being asked of them. And here the example is facial recognition, a very well-known and much debated application of machine learning. And the point here is that they will have to understand what the problem is. Why is it important? How does one machine learning algorithm work? And what are the problems associated with it? And they're very clear questions that they should answer, and they are given resources. So they are given one research paper, which they're asked to understand and analyze, and also some public coverage of problems associated with this technology. So here's a New York Times example article on facial recognition is accurate if you're a white guy. So clearly some ethical problems associated with it here. And then finally, there's a page on the deliverables and a rubric down here as well. So the deliverables are a 10-minute presentation where they explain the problem, the technical background, and the ethical issues. And also, they will all write a peer review for a presentation given by a different group. And a clear list of criteria by which this will be examined. So perhaps to contextualize a little bit, the point here is, or the learning theory, the underlying is to build on social constructivism and on problem-based learning. Also in contrast to the other projects, which are pretty individual and well guided, here they get a little bit more of independence and can work towards utopicity or yeah, more individual work. And I guess that's all I wanted to say here.
Thank you, Leah. So how likely do you think that you'll be able to get these changes through?
So it's not, I'm not, you mean in terms of
being able to actually
official approval?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, so we've been given a lot of freedom due to moving online, COVID, and so on, to restructure our classes, make them more applicable to the online mode. So actually, I don't expect big problems, especially because the assessment criteria aren't changed a lot, right? The
Great.
largest weight is still on what it used to be.
So when do you think you might actually try and implement that?
Next semester, I'm planning to do that.
Cool. We've got time for one other question, if anyone wants to ask a question.
I had a question or maybe a comment on just the new assignment that you had added that was only 5%. And I just wondered about, just thinking from a student perspective, if you'd thought that through, if they're going to take it seriously enough if it's only worth 5% and it's a
good point, Jeanette.
Yeah, I guess it's a trade-off between actually getting it through, as Thomas said, and also it's an experiment in the first round, and I would like to increase the percentage, but I think as a safety net and for testing the waters, it might be good to give it a fairly light weight.
Yeah, I have found that introducing some innovative project, students do them even if they don't have assessment weighting, but they have to be pretty cool though. Okay, thank you. We're over to Jeanette as our next presenter.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Cool. And we can hear you, which is a good step. We'll start the timer now.
Okay, so as I outlined in my draft proposal, I've been using the ABC Learning Design Framework, conversational framework, to develop my course map. So this subject is now fully online. It's a practical subject that prepares music therapy master's students for practicing music therapy methods in a range of different clinical contexts. So it's really focusing on developing skills in the main areas of improvisation, songwriting, using music technology, receptive music therapy methods, and repertoire development. And it's a first year subject, so it's a graduate level subject, and I'm currently teaching with about 45 students enrolled. And in this sort of homepage, I've got some links to the handbook and the modules and the subject overview. So we'll just click into the subject overview, where I kind of give a little bit more detail about what's going to be covered in the course and refer to some of the learning theories and I guess focuses of the subject in terms of authentic learning and focusing on problem-based learning tasks to make it authentic. And these are based in the social learning theory and social constructivism, which have informed my course design. So I've also got a link in here to my specific ecology of resources table, which I can show you. And yeah, here I'm just outlining, similar to how Thomas has done in this subject, the different tools and the rationale for those, and some links to them as well. So Canvas for some synchronous and asynchronous communication, Zoom for our fortnightly live classes, and then some other online tools like Padlet, Perusal, and then some more music specific tools like GarageBand and Soundtrap, and Ultimate Guitar and things like that. And I'm also planning to incorporate a collaborative shared library like we've done in this subject. I think that's going to be a great idea and something that the students can take on after the subject finishes as well. So thinking about the format for creating this learning environment, I really want to enhance their learning outcomes based on the conversational framework by focusing on developing a learning conversation between peers and teachers, and also some expert practitioners, which we have coming in to teach into the subject. Lots of opportunities for role play, peer collaboration, observation and feedback, and combination, like I said, of fortnightly live classes and alternate week will be asynchronous learning tasks and things to work through. So we'll just go back to my subject overview and show you the course map. So I've got here across the top, you can see Laurelard's 6 different learning types, which I've kind of tried to divide my content up into both the topic area, which is sort of divided into 4 different areas, and then the assessments that kind of link into those as well. So the first topic area is using beat-based music in music therapy, and you can see some of the tools there. So they need to attend the Zoom class, watch YouTube tutorials, practice doing some multi-track recording themselves. We also get them to annotate some articles in Perusal, and I'll just sort of flick out and show you and look how they're doing that with this particular article. So there's lots of commenting happening in here and feeding back on each other's thoughts. Then there is an assignment that's linked to that content area, which I'll show you shortly. And then topic area 2 is an introduction to improvisation, where we get them to do lots of practicing, giving them some Zoom examples, video examples in Zoom, and some topic-based discussion blogs. Also providing some case examples, so like of light music therapy sessions using these techniques as well, to scaffold their learning. And then have an assessment related to that topic area, which also, the assessment also links into topic area 3, which is receptive methods in music therapy. And then the final topic area as well. And then the final assignment, which is the summative assignment, the first 2 are formative, is a live video folio of 15 songs and some last minute adaptations that they need to do. So I'll just jump back into my Canvas site. In the subject overview page, we've also got the intended learning outcomes and generic skills and things that students will need to will cover in this subject, as well as the assessments and kind of things that they're interested in. So now I'll go into the modules. So I've got a welcome module here where I'm trying to set up some communication protocols and get them to even just start by introducing themselves. I'm asking them to, like what we did in this course, get them to upload a video at the start and reply to this discussion, posted in this discussion topic in Canvas. This is actually the second, they would know each other already mostly, so I'm getting them to say something they've learned in the MTM1 subject and something they're hoping to develop in MTM2. And also want them to get them to set up or update their Canvas profile page, because as I mentioned in my last presentation, we've got a really varied background of people. So some of them are coming from allied health disciplines like speech therapy or occupational therapy. Some of them are undergraduate music students who are wanting to go into therapy as a professional area of practice. And then there's also people who are professional musicians wanting to change career directions. So I'm getting them to upload that information in there as well. Communication protocols. So I've developed a community discussion board in Canvas where I'm getting them to post questions that might be generally about the subject or about assignments, and I'm encouraging them to respond to each other. And there's been a fair bit of activity in there already this semester, which has been good. And then we have I've done the ecology of resources. So maybe we'll go into, there's some subject information. So I've actually created, updated my own profile, but pasted some information in here about my own background, contact details, and professional websites, as well as how to contact the tutors. And we've got a plan for the weekly learning schedule. So it gives them an idea of, shows clearly when it's a synchronous class or an asynchronous learning, the learning tasks that they have to do for each content area, and then some of the resources that they'll be drawing on from the ecology of resources in those particular classes. So I might just have a look at the assignments now. So there's two formative assignments. The first one is on the first content area of beat-based music, where they need to create their own song using raps and beats, and then also upload a written reflection as well. And then the next one is they have to upload a live video recording of them doing a sort of a mock session with somebody, with a volunteer. And then we're also going to get them to use feedback fruits to provide feedback on each other's videos. So they're kind of learning a little bit through watching other people and learning from each other, as well as having a go themselves and relying only on our feedback. And yeah, as I said, the final assignment is a folio assignment. They need to upload a continuous live video of these 15 songs, include some original songs, and there'll be a mystery song that'll be given to them only 48 hours before the submission date. Sorry, I've also got the assessment criteria. We don't actually use official rubrics for this MTM suite of subjects, but we do have clear assessment criteria that we mark against. And the reason for not using a rubric is mainly because the criteria aren't evenly weighted and they're almost like each one is a hurdle. So we sort of do it in that format. And just to finish, I'll take you back into the modules and maybe take you through some of the content and the learning tasks to give you an example. Oh yeah, and also I do have in here a mid-semester survey. I mentioned that in my previous presentation. I'm really keen to get feedback sort of halfway through the semester and not have to wait till the end of the year for the SES to kind of see if there's any modifications or things that we can improve along the way. So for each of the weeks, I've outlined the weekly learning materials in blocks rather than having sort of one page for each week, because it sort of feels like it lays it out more clearly. So week one summary, we give them some information about what we're going to be covering, So that first week we had an Indigenous hip hop artist come in and talk to them about his work. So there's some videos of video clips of his, and then an interview with him that they could watch. And then they had to do this written task. So every second week there's an online learning task they have to submit. And then we encouraging them in this particular one to engage with each other's contributions about hip hop and music therapy, and uploading a song that they've created. This is the second week when we had a live synchronous class. We talked through a whole lot of beat-based genres, and then we gave them some clinical scenarios where they had to go into breakout groups and use Padlet to provide their answers, discussing groups, and then provide whether they would choose option A or option B.
We'll have to finish there, Jeanette, but that's looking great.
Okay, great.
Thank you very much. And our next presenter is Rebecca, to our last one in this session.
Thank you. Okay, so hopefully you should be able to see my screen now.
Yep, that's good. All good.
Great. So the subject that I focused on is second year ecology. So we have about 200 students, and these students will be mixed from different majors within the Bachelor of Science. Previously, they wouldn't have had really any ecological kind of teaching prior to this particular unit, but now they will have some ecology lectures modules within their first year. And so this is currently undergoing a curriculum change to reflect the curriculum change in year one, but also to make the subject a bit smoother to run. So where should we start? Subject overview. So basically the students, the semester is split into kind of looking at the different spatial scales of ecology. So it starts off at the level of individuals, and it goes right up to ecosystems and then applications. So a core component, so these are the learning outcomes here. So students should be able to explain the kind of hierarchical structure of ecological systems, what are the core theories, and then a core aspect of this particular module is then the students themselves coming up with their own experiment, hypotheses, and writing a scientific paper. So in terms of their assessment, it used to be face-to-face lectures, but now it's going to be changed. So the ecological theory is going to be delivered through online videos. And so then I've taken this kind of flip classroom approach where the face-to-face time will be reduced and it will be used to work through problems. So in order for the students to be able to self-reflect on the theories that they're learning through those videos, they will have weekly formative quizzes that they can take, and then they'll have fortnightly assessed quizzes. And I can show you an example in a moment, but the quizzes will be problem-based. So it won't just be kind of reiterating theory, it will be applying that theory to a particular problem or looking at data from a paper or something like that. In terms of the practical, so they have 3 hours of practical a week, and the first few weeks of the semester will be them learning learning to collect data. So these will be quite guided sessions, but it will be basically working their way then up to them working in groups and coming up with their own observations and hypotheses, and then collecting their data and analyzing it. So I think I'll go and I'll show you the structure. I'm on another page in a moment. But basically in week 6, one of the first assessments is that the students will, in their group, give a live 10-minute presentation, which will present their observations, their hypotheses, and their methods. and the students will then peer review the methods via Google Form. And so this will be worth 10% of their mark. And then they'll have a scientific, at the scientific paper that's due in week 12. And this project report can be aligned with the journal of their choice. And so that means that they could direct it either more at a very kind of scientific ecological journal for scientists, or they could choose to write it in more of an applied management style journal. So that would be their choice. And then in the final week, we will have a Twitter conference where the group will present their results via Twitter. And so this really just gives an overview. So the modules are based around the different spatial scales that they will be learning, so from individuals, communities, and then we have the different quizzes set out here. And so now I think we'll just go into the modules. So in terms of the modules, we have the ecology of resources. So the lectures will be linked via YouTube, and the lectures will be done in also an online format, so using Google Slides or Adobe Spark. And the presentation for the peer review, we will also ask the students to make this available online via one of these or something else of their choice. We will use Twitter for the Twitter conference, and this is the hashtag here. And then there's details in the modules of how the Twitter conference will run. And then if we go back to this modules here, so really we want to, I've been really interested in this kind of the pedagogy to heutagogy continuum. So it's set up, the course is set up to explore that continuum. And so and to be able to learn through peer learning, so to really establish kind of this community of inquiry. And so much like this course, we have a Padlet here to introduce themselves. So they pin themselves on the map. And I've done an example there. Also, my experience of discussion boards on Canvas is that they weren't that well used. And so there's, to start off, there's also a poll for the students to pick what platform that we should use for the out of class discussions. And also using some Padlet here. So one of the key kind of learning outcomes is for the students to be able to make ecological observations. And so this Padlet's set up so that students can post just whatever they see around when they're walking, doing their daily walk, or when they're collecting data for their reports. This is the course map. So just to finish off with this course map. So it's obviously it's a blended course because it's a significant practical component. We'll be transitioning through this PAH continuum where, for example, the first part of the practicals is quite structured, and then they have to choose their own, they have to then do their own experiment that will be chosen by them in their group. The flipped classroom, so the videos will be asynchronous, but the activities will be group activities, problem-based, and really focused on peer learning. And assignments. So these are just all the quizzes set out. The quizzes, of course, will just be marked based on the correct answers. But the Google Forms are all set up for the peer review of the methods along with their rubrics. And I think the modules, if we go down just quickly to finish off. So we'll have the YouTube links and the Google Slides. So we're still developing this. So this will be semester 2 next year. So the videos are being developed this year. And then there will be links to the practice quizzes and also any kind of problems for that, the face-to-face time. So practice quizzes will be problem-based. So yeah, I think that's all I had to say.
Right.
For my.
Great, and there's a minute and a bit left if anyone has a question. I guess my question would be, where do you see perhaps a student e-portfolio being used to help facilitate the course as well, rather than perhaps just sharing their work through Canvas?
Yes, so I guess in terms of their presentations, they would be all online, and also the peer feedback via Google Forms, and the group work would be we'd encourage them to use kind of collaborative online spaces, but the actual practical report would be individual. So yeah, I had thought, how could online portfolios potentially be used like we're using them here? But yeah, I didn't, oops, that's my 10 minutes, sorry. I didn't feel, I guess, I hadn't fitted them in currently. Maybe that's something I could think more about.
Yeah, I encourage you to think about that. I think it would fit quite well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's our time. Thank you very much. And thank you all for everyone keeping to time today, which is fantastic. We've got a break now, so you can grab a coffee, some lunch, early lunch if you like. And we're back at 12:30 with Sam and followed by Caitlin. So looking forward to our afternoon session as well. Thank you all.